we're looking at Williams's article, The Self in the Future. And on Friday, I'll try to zap it up with a way of putting in perspective why the identity of the self is so difficult. Next week, we'll spend the whole week looking at Parfit's article, Personal Identity. So we'll really have had an extended look at personal identity by the end of the class. I hope this does not seem too much. What I hope is that you'll find that all these topics about identity and memory connect up to each other, so that if you're choosing to do any one of the essays about Laurie Paul or memory or identity, any of these topics that or fission, that you'll find that all the issues connect, so that all of this stuff will be helpful. That's what I hope. On the other hand, if you find that this is just a bit too much about personal identity, then feel free to let us know discreetly, tactfully. And if you build, I'm amenable to moving on if you think this is a bit too much. Okay. So today, Williams. So the Prince and the Cobbler is really what starts the discussion of personal identity. The Prince and the Cobbler case destabilizes the way we think about the self. Until we had this case of people swapping bodies, it was possible to think, well, the person just is the human being. That's the same thing. Or if you believe in a soul, you could say the person just is the soul. That's the same thing. After Locke's example, it seems like these ideas just can't be right. That example is what really starts the last 300 years of discussion of personal identity. The second kind of example that someone mentioned, actually someone constructed in class just a couple of times ago, is the possibility of printing off different people. This came into the literature only, I think, in the 1950s with Bernard Williams, and Parfit's discussion is probably the most far-reaching set of conclusions drawn from that. So that's what we'll look at next week. But Williams's article that we're looking at today is trying to go back and look at Locke's example of the Prince and the Cobbler. And what he says is that the example of the Prince and the Cobbler is really a cheat. It doesn't do what it was supposed to do. We shouldn't be willing to talk about people swapping bodies. That makes no sense. The key thing in his analysis is that case with the Prince and the Cobbler is just one of lots of different possibilities, and it's really been picked out as the one that would be most inclined to talk about in the context of that case. We'd be most inclined to talk about people swapping bodies. So here's the Prince and the Cobbler. That's the Prince on the left, hard though it is to believe. And there are lots of different cases you could have with these two characters. One case would be, suppose nothing happens to the Prince, but the Cobbler just acquires apparent memories of the Prince's past life. Right, that could happen. That kind of thing does happen. People say, I'm Napoleon or whatever. Yeah? And in that case, we wouldn't have any inclination to say they'd swapped bodies. We'd just say something's gone wrong with the Cobbler. Try and get the Cobbler working again. And even if the Cobbler got these memories by them somehow being copied over from the Prince, even if the Prince had on a headset so you could see his hard disk there on the screen, and you copied over the memories to the Cobbler, you wouldn't say they've swapped bodies if the Prince himself was completely unaffected by this. So in that kind of case, you wouldn't say the Prince is now occupying the Cobbler's body. You'd just say the Cobbler is delusional. Or you might copy over only half of the prince's memories, and caused trouble for the unfortunate Cobbler that way. In these cases, you wouldn't have any inclination to say anybody swapped bodies. And even if you start doing it symmetrically, even if you start messing with the prince too, why say you've swapped bodies if you disrupt some of the prince's memories? Williams says, the extreme neatness of the situation is in satisfying, if any could, the description changing bodies. But the neatness is basically artificial. It's the product of the will of the experimenter to produce a situation which would naturally elicit, with minimum hesitation, that description. And once you started tampering with this guy's memories and tampering with that guy's memories, there are lots of scenarios you could have. And if you've got that potential to tamper with the memories of the two of them, you could easily have left off earlier or gone on longer. Yeah, you could have done more or less. If you have some model of ghostly persons and bodies, which are in some sense actually moved around by certain procedures, you could regard the neat case where you tamper with the prince's experiments just enough to say, the cobbler's now shifted in here, and you tamper with the cobbler's memories just enough to say about the prince, he's shifted in here. Then you could regard, if you had some picture of ghosts associated with bodies that might move around, then you might say, this is the effective experiment, the one method that really did result in the ghostly persons changing places without being destroyed, dispersed, or whatever. But we can't seriously use such a model. There aren't really ghosts associated with people's bodies. It's as if there's a kind of spark. The image you get is there's a kind of spark traveling from the one body to the other, carrying the memories with it, carrying the self with it. But that is just a picture that it's natural to use here. The experimenter has not, in the sense of this model of ghostly persons, induced a change of bodies. He's rather produced the one situation out of a range of equally possible situations that we'd be most disposed to call a change of bodies. But that's just a mistake. Nobody's changed bodies here. All that there are two human beings being subject to different kinds of damage. That's the basic analysis of what's going on in the Prince and the Cobbler cases. There is kind of illusion you get of the spark traveling from one body to the other. But that's all it is. It's just an illusion, a metaphor, a picture. You don't want to take it too seriously. Perfectly plain what Williams is saying there, yeah. That's right, yep. Yep. He really has those memories, yeah. Yeah. In a way, that's fair enough. I mean, suppose you have the thing with the headsets, right? I'm the cobbler, there's the prince, and we've both got our headsets on. Our brains are showing up on the screen. Suppose it's the year 3000. This is the what you can do in the latest Mac. You just put the headsets on your friends, and then you can move the files around, right? So you leave the prince completely intact, but you just copy these files over onto my brain and destroy the current files. Yep. That's the situation you're describing. Yeah. Well, in that case, the prince is oblivious to all this, right? The prince might be asleep. The prince might be engaged in higher contemplation. The prince might be thinking about the future of his subjects the whole time. It would be crazy to say the prince isn't over there. You see what I mean? The prince is... Two princes. Well, I think what's happened to me in this situation is very unfortunate. Yeah. Now, you're right to say it wouldn't be delusional exactly, because you could use me as a source of information about the prince. Right, if you're a newspaper reporter, yeah, then boy, the things I could tell you, right? I could make a lot of money doing this. That might be the motive for doing the thing, yeah? So suppose it was newspaper reporters that did that. Then you'd say, but what about poor old Campbell? That's terrible what you did to Campbell. Yeah, you wouldn't say, oh, you made Campbell a prince. You see what I mean? You just did this terrible thing to me. Yeah. But I don't think that's what we'd say. I mean, look, if I've earned a pittance of retirement, then I still want that. You see what I mean? It's still Campbell here. It's just that you've done this terrible thing to him. I don't know how you can live with yourself. But you see what I mean? But it doesn't make me a prince. If only it were so. There's only one prince. I mean, if the king dies, or the queen dies, that's who gets to be king. Actually, that's very... Well, anyway, that's... you see what I mean? It won't be me. I don't get to go on the throne at any point. Yeah, I don't have the genes. Yeah. Yes. Everybody in this class does that. Whenever I try to call anybody, they always look round. Yeah. Yes, right. Yes. Right. Right, you would need the body. You need the same body for it to be the same person. Yeah. Right. That's exactly right. That's what Williams is saying. If someone tells you they're Napoleon, no matter how persuasive they are, if you have a robust sense of reality, you just hold on to it. Whatever else is going on, you are not Napoleon. Yeah. Yeah. Bang on. That's what Williams is saying. Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah. You're just reinventing it. You see what I mean? Yeah, but that's it exactly. So these stories like Yamada Kun and the Seven Witches that we were talking about, these stories don't really make sense, is the idea. Yeah, for people talking about them. For just that reason. If you've got a robust sense of reality, you're going to demand that it's the same body. Anything else? Yeah. Yes, it does depend on how you define it. Okay, so, no, that's an important reaction. One reaction to this would be, well, the important thing is to define your terms. And definitions are arbitrary, right? You can define your terms however you like. The important thing is to fix a definition and then stick to it. Yep. I actually would have... That's actually what I want to come on last, under that section called uncertainty. Yep. Because in a way what you're saying is there's no real uncertainty here. Once you get down to brass tacks and say what you mean by identity, you might demand for identity, sameness of the body, or you might say the identity is defined as having the right kind of memories. Just define it however you want. And whatever way you do it, it's perfectly definite what's going on. There's no real mystery here. Yeah? Okay. Williams has some really interesting things to say about that, because I agree that's an important reaction. I'll come on to that in just a minute. Yeah. Yeah? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So my reading of him anyhow is that what he's saying is, here's the prince, here's all the different things you could be doing to the prince. little bit of damage to the memories, little bit of damage to the body, a lot of damage to the memories, a lot of damage to the body. Similarly with the Cobbler, you could, if you have the resources to do this kind of experiment, then you could be doing lots of different stuff to the Cobbler. There is a point at which you've tampered with the prince's memories to this extent, and you've tampered with the Cobbler's memories to that extent, at which you have this inclination to say, here the spark traveled across. Yeah? But that's a hallucination. There's no, if you just look at the reality here, you just get two spectrums, and there's no particular reason to say anything weirdly different is going on at these points than is going on at any other point in the spectrum. Does that make sense? Yep. Identity can't be something that comes in degrees. I guess that's right, yeah. Because we feel this impulse to say they've swapped at this point, but as I was saying with these other cases, we just say there wasn't any change of identity. We don't say a little of the Cobbler moved over here and a little bit of the prince moved over here. They were quite identical there, not quite identical here. Again, I think that's actually related to the definitions question, and we'll come back to that. Anything else on that? Okay, so here's another way of phrasing the prince and the Cobbler case. This is, well, what I'm going to do now is Williams sets up a variant of the prince and the Cobbler case that is meant to blow it up forever. So we're not going to be driven about by this example anymore. So here's Locke's scenario, a Locke-style scenario where the prince and the Cobbler are told their brains are going to be swapped into each other's bodies. Right? We've got these convenient hinges in the top of your head. We are going to take out the jack plugs and pop your brain into this guy's body, pop the other guy's brain into your body. Now, one of the resultant bodies will be tortured and the other one rewarded. This is a kind of scenario that keeps coming up, right? We were talking about this kind of scenario with Laurie Paul, Serenity and Pain. And you're given the choice which body is going to be tortured and which body is going to be rewarded. Okay, so here's your question, class. That's you at the bottom left, right? You're the prince. That's you later. That's the prince's body later. At the top left. There's the person with the Cobbler's body at the bottom right. And there's the person with the Cobbler's body top right. And you're told the brain's going to be swapped out from this guy, put in there. Now, which one, you're this guy down at the bottom left, okay? So which one would you like to be tortured? And which one would you like to be rewarded? Your call. So put your hand up if you, yes? Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean about the jack plugs. Let us suppose that the humanity has evolved to the extent that the brain is in the skull, anchored in by means of conveniently removable jack plugs. So you can just go into a new body and be plugged in, and everything just works fine. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So are you ready? Have you decided? Okay. So if you'd like the person on the left to be tortured and then the person on the right rewarded, put your hand up. And if you'd like the person on the right to be tortured and the person on the left to be rewarded, put your hand up. Sorry? You're starting out in the bottom left. So only one for the... Yeah, I think that was only one. Anyone else for... Two. Right. Okay, very good. Do you have any comment on that? Yeah? Yes. Well, it's certainly a physical sense, yes. Right. Okay, but there will be, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but there will be pain involved. not just damage to the body. Yeah, in fact, between you and me, there will be a lot of pain. But that's okay? Okay, right. Okay, so the classical choice is the one that most of you guys have gone for. Williams is actually arguing for the response that you have and that Umra has. But the classical choice is the one that most of you guys have made. I mean, after all, you might say, look, what's going to happen here? After the session, what's the person with the cobbler's body going to say? They're going to say, you know what they're going to say? Because they've got the prince's brain, right? They've got your current brain. So they're going to say, boy, did I make the right call there? As they listen to the shrieks and howls coming from the cells opposite. And meantime, they tuck into their reward, whatever it is. They're going to say, well, I'm glad I made that call. Pity about the guy in the other cell. Right? You know what they're going to say. And the person with the prince's body is going to say, blast it, if only I'd had the call, I would have made a different call. Yep. So you say, okay, if the prince chooses that the prince's body person will be tortured and the cobbler's body rewarded, and afterwards the cobbler's body person will say, I remember making that choice and I'm so glad I did. Pity about the cobbler. But there you go, into each life a little rain must fall. Yep. I know they don't get switched back. They don't get switched back. He's not being tortured. It's the one in the prince's body. Yeah. Didn't I say that right? Yeah. I do sometimes get mixed up when I'm doing this. But if I said this, if I explained this correctly, then what most of you suggested should happen, if you're the person with the prince's body, is that the person with the prince's body should be the one that gets tortured. Yep. And then the one with the cobbler's body will be saying, boy, was that the right call. I made a good call there. What? That's the prince's brain generating speech. Well, that's the issue. Is it the same one that made the call? Yeah. By make the call, I mean decide who gets tortured and who gets rewarded. Yeah. And so they make the call before anything happens. The prince does. Yeah, make the call before. He's the prince. He gets to decide. And so he makes the call before anything happens. And then after it happens, I'm saying the person with the cobbler's body and the prince's brain will be saying, that was a good call. Yes, right? That's a classical choice. Yeah, that's what most people went for. I hope I explained that the right way around. Okay, good, okay. Okay, well, follow me very closely. Follow me like a leopard. So here's Williams's case 2. In case 2, you're told you as the prince are going to be tortured. That is bad news, right? I mean, you say, well, will it hurt? And say, yes, it's torture. It's going to hurt a lot. So that's very bad news, right? And then they say, but something else is going to happen before we torture you. Before we torture you, we are going to drive you insane. And you say, well, that doesn't really help. You're not bringing me good news here. That sounds terrible, right? And you say, well, what do you mean insane anyway? What kind of insanity? Well, it'll be a familiar kind of insanity. Your current memories are all going to be obliterated. You're going to think you're a different person. You're going to think you're Napoleon or somebody, or a cobbler, or something like that. Right? We're going to give you these impressions of having had quite a different past life to the one you did. And you say, you fiends! You fiends! How can you do that? And they say, well, we haven't told you the least of it. We're going to do the same to someone else. At the same time as we're doing this to you, someone else, the cobbler, will be driven insane. But we're not going to torture him. As part of our fiendish plan, we're going to reward him. Now, as it happens, the fake memories that we give you, the prince, before we torture you, will be those that match the cobbler's past life. And let's suppose this isn't going to be an accident. We're actually going to draw on the cobbler's autobiography to decide just which memories, fake memories, we use to drive you insane. That's what we're going to do with you. So it's not going to be an accident, it's like the cobbler. But then we're going to torture you. And similar things are going to be done to the cobbler as part of our plan. In the way that these fiends and comics always do have some crazy plan. Right? So that's the situation, right? That's you on the left. You're going to be driven mad and then tortured. And meanwhile, we're going to be doing that same thing to some guy in this cobbler. Only we're going to reward him at the end of the process for helping us. Yeah? Now, let's see, put up your hand. Is that a good scenario for you or is that a bad scenario? Put up your hand now if that is a good scenario for you. If you're the prince. And put up your hand if that is a bad scenario for you. Wow, okay. So the overwhelming majority say it's a bad scenario. Those who think it's a good scenario? Anybody want to comment on that? Okay. But now, remember, this was Locke's thing, right? Where the guy on the left is getting tortured. This is what most of you chose the first time, right? So the guy on the left gets tortured. The guy on the right gets rewarded. Yeah? Now, this is exactly the same situation that you just chose. It's just been described in a different way. The first time I described it, I said, that's just the memories flashing across from body to body. This time when I described it, I said, well, they're both being driven mad. But it's really the same thing that's going on. Memories are being copied from one life into another. Yeah? The hard facts as to what's happening here, the basic physical facts, are exactly the same in these two scenarios. I describe it this way. You guys all say, but that's terrible. You can't do that to a prince, not to me. Right? That's what everyone says. Yep. I describe exactly the same situation in a different way. I say, you're going to be in a body swap. And you say, that sounds great. I'll go for that. But that's just a difference in notation. There's no real difference in ultimately what's happening here. So this case that everybody finds horrifying, and this case that you think, yeah, I'd go for that. Shame about the cobbler. They're the same. You can't have it both ways. Either this is good or this is bad. Yeah? But you just described it differently. Sorry? Not switching the actual brain. Well, let's see. In this case, they're not switching the actual brain. Well, what we talked about before was that an actual swap of brain is not really essential to this kind of story. Yeah, you can just move the files. You see what I mean? So the question is, how do we describe what's going on when we're moving the files? Suppose it is like this, Apple in the year 3000 kind of scenario where you can literally move the files from brain to brain. The one scenario is, you're doing something weird and horrible to me when you move in alien files. Yeah. Another scenario is, you're just swapping bodies. That's another way of describing exactly the same situation. It's like, to take a more trivial example, on a computer, You can talk. Sometimes when you move a file from one disk to another, well, sometimes it's called moving a file, and sometimes it's called copying a file. Yeah, it's exactly the same thing that's going on. Yeah, but how should you think of it? You see what I mean? So the underlying facts about whatever's going on with the electricity, that's exactly the same in both cases. Yeah, but one way of describing it is copying the files, and everybody says, "Hey, that's great." Another way you describe it is as moving the file. Sorry, one way you describe it is as copying the files, and everybody says, "No, don't. You can't do that to me." The other way to describe it is as moving the files, and you say, "That's great. I not only make it, I get rewarded. Fantastic." Yeah, but that's just a trivial verbal difference in how one and the same situation is being described. Yeah, one more minute. Yeah. Can. It's not in the place it usually was. It originally was. Yeah, but yeah, yeah. Well, it's hard to see why that should make a difference. I mean, what I mean is, suppose it's copied over. Yeah. Suppose it's moved over and no files left over there. Yeah. So then he's moved into this body. Yeah. Well, if he's really moved into this body, then if the copy is also reinstalled in this body, well, why should that matter? He's over here. What's going on over there doesn't matter to him. Yeah. Yeah. But these are good points. Yeah. Which body? Yeah, that's a natural. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, right. In which body will I be opening my eyes? Yeah, that's what you want to know. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good. That's just what you want to know. In which body will I be opening my eyes? Yeah. But the point here is you can describe both of these. You can describe this as a case in which, here it's being described as a case in which you're opening your eyes in the same old body, but with some crazy set of memories and being tortured. And in this is describing the same situation as one in which you're opening your eyes in a new body with all the same memories. And this one you're being rewarded. It's the same situation, whichever way you describe it. Yeah. Yeah. In the first scenario, you're 100% sure. Oh, I see. Well, but that goes back to the last question. It shouldn't. Which brain it is isn't really key. Once you get the point that the memories could be the memory traces is a bit more abstract than just a bit of the brain, and you can move these data structures around. Yes. Yes. That's right. That's exactly right. That's what you guys all demonstrated, right? Because I describe it one way. You say, that's great, I'll vote for that. I describe it the other way. You say, no, let's go for some different scenario. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, right. That's exactly right. That's the important thing, I think, that the psychological impact of these two different descriptions is huge. Yeah. But how can one be right and the other wrong? if the two cases are exactly the same, then why are you having such different attitudes towards them? Let me just go back to Williams's analysis of what's going on here. He says, remember he said, the experimenter has not, in the sense of that model of the spark going across, the experimenter has not induced a change of bodies. He just described the one situation out of a range of equally possible situations that we'd be most disposed to call a change of bodies. But there is this principle that your fears can extend to future pain, whatever psychological changes precede it. I'll say more about that in a second. But that seems straightforward. Even if they're going to drive me crazy, I'm still concerned about my future pain. That's a straightforward thing to hang on to. So in that case, if that's right, then perhaps we should decide that if we were person A, if we were the prince in the bottom left, then if we were to decide selfishly, we should pass the pain on to the person with the other body. It would be risky. And that there is room for risk here is itself a major feature of the problem. You'd think, okay, I'm not sure what to do, but let's try passing the pain on to the other guy, onto the guy with the other body. Okay? Is it clear what Williams is doing here anyway? He's taking this example that it's not just Locke-Hadit. It drives so much fiction. It drives so much literature, movies, mangas, whatever exactly mangas are. Is that the right word? Mangas, is that plural? Okay, I don't know. Anyway, and it's driven so much philosophical discussion of the self, that kind of case. And it maybe drives these thoughts about reincarnation and so on, that of course you can make sense of being in a different body at a later time. And maybe those stories just don't make sense. Maybe we shouldn't be taking them so seriously. So let's go back to that thing about the principle that one's fears can extend to future pain, whatever psychological changes precede it. I think what he has in mind here is something like this. Suppose that Jim is your glamorous, popular friend, and you're told that, look, after a certain point in the future, after next month, Jim is going to completely ignore you. And you're aghast. Oh no! Being ignored by Jim, would that not be terrible? Am I the only one that gets maybe you guys are beyond that kind of reaction. I have that kind of reaction sometimes. Don't ignore me, Jim. Anyway, what was I talking about? But of course, it can also happen that you could be told, well, in a month's time, you will have completely forgotten about Jim. You will have a whole fresh set of interests, right? You might be going through one of Laurie Paul's transformative experiences, and by the time Jim's ignoring you, you will be like, who's Jim? I mean, Jim? Who cares about Jim? So that can happen. I mean, in fact, you might think of, if you've got delusions that you're a cobbler by the time Jim's ignoring you, then Jim's ignoring you will be the least of your problems. But one reason that all these examples tend to focus on pain is that, suppose you're told that in the future, the fortune teller is looking into a crystal ball and telling you, you are going to experience great pain. Then somehow, it's not like the Jim case, where things could change, you could move on and not care about Jim. It's hard to see how you could move on and not care about your future pain. That's still going to be awful, whatever psychological changes you go through in the meantime. So even if you're told you're going to have changed, you're going to have delusions that you're a cobbler, your concern with that future pain can reach through that change in your mind. you see what I mean? You're concerned that Jim should pay attention to you. That's not going to reach through a big change like that. But you're concerned about future pain. That is going to reach through any psychological change you undergo. So you're concerned about the future pain is reaching through the changing your psychological state. And the concern about whether Jim ignores you doesn't reach through changing your psychological state. That's why you can say, if I'm the prince down here, I really care about that future pain that body might be undergoing, even though there's been all these psychological changes. Now, one question that is the one that a couple of people have raised in different ways is, could it be indeterminate whether you're the prince body person or the cobbler body person? What I mean is, suppose you're given this case, you're told, look, we've got it set up, actually. As philosophers, we are fed up of doing thought experiments. We are not living in the real world. We are not living in a 17th century anymore. We can do this. We've arbitrarily decided that for one of the students in the room, at the end of the lecture, for two of the students in the room, we're going to take them down to the front and do it and see what happens. And let me tell you the news. It's you. You are one of those two lucky students. Right? That's what's going to happen. One of them is going to be tortured, one of them is going to be rewarded. And we'll do the memory swap. And you think, well, but this is really confusing. Right? Whenever I think about this stuff about body swaps and princes and cobblers and all that, I just get muddled up. Is there really a right answer here? I mean, philosophers bicker about this kind of thing, and they don't really seem to reach any definite conclusion, as usual. So maybe there just isn't any fact of the matter here. So you're told there's going to be that guy with your body on the left, there's going to be that guy with somebody else's body on the right, but your memories. And maybe it's just indeterminate. Maybe there's no fact of the matter which one's going to be you. So one of them is going to be tortured, and you say nervously, but will it be me that's going through all that pain? Will it be me that gets the pain? That is a natural question, right? I just want to check there isn't a generation thing here. You guys still care about pain, right? Yes? Pain would be... Pain still... I mean, real bad physical. You're being tortured. Pain, right? Yes, that would be terrible, right? So what you naturally wonder is, but will it be me that gets the pain? And then I tell you, well, it's indeterminate. Define it how you like. I mean, that was a question about definitions, right? Define yourself as the one with the body. Then you're getting the pain. Define yourself as the one with the memories. Then you're not getting the pain. Easy. It's just a matter of how you define it. But that doesn't answer the question. You didn't want to know about if I define it this way or if I define it that way. What you want to know is that going to be me? Okay. And what you want to know is, should I be afraid? That was what we talked about with Laurie Paul's stuff. You know, when you're imaginatively thinking about the future. That's what that imaginative understanding of your future. That's what Laurie Paul was saying is so important if you're deciding whether to have a child, if you're deciding whether to eat durian. What seems so important is, in imagination, reaching out to your own future and getting it. And what you want to know is, which one should I be reaching out imaginatively to in thinking about these scenarios? Unless you know that, you don't know whether you should be afraid. And it can't be just a matter of definition or a matter of saying what you like or a matter of degree. As Umar suggested, you might say, you say, oh, well, it'll be a little bit you and not so much you. If you should be afraid, then it's you. And if it's not you, then you don't need to be afraid. So here's how Williams puts it. The subject has an incurable difficulty in how you may think about the future subject. If you engage in future projective imaginative thinking, that kind of thing that Laurie Paul was talking about getting into your future life. If you're saying, well, that's how I'm going to think about this, then you implicitly answer the question. That's going to be me. If you let it catch your imagination and think, that's the one who's getting I'm getting those rewards now, or I'm getting tortured now. And if you think, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to project into the position of the one who's getting tortured, then that's just another way of answering the question. Because that's saying, it's not me that's getting tortured, so I don't have to be afraid. And if you've got something like, say, your father's old radio, your father loved that thing. It's been repaired a dozen times. It's got a new case. It's got new components. It's got a new speaker. It's got new controls. It's been repaired over a dozen times now with lots of new components. And you think, well, is this really the same radio that my father had? Yeah, I think, well, I'm not sure if it is the same radio, actually. I mean, every single component is new. There's not a single bit of it that he ever actually held. Well, you might think, well, I feel a little bit sentimental about it, but not all that sentimental about it. But if you feel like that could you feel like that about a future person, whether it's you or not? You think, well, I care a little bit about their shrieks. What's going on? I care a little bit about their shrieks, but not too much about their shrieks. And once you feel ambivalent about a future person, that's just another way of saying, it's not me. You couldn't have a matter of degree here. So when Williams talks about the subject's difficulty in thinking either projectively or non-projectively about the situation, do you put yourself into that imagined life and say that's me? Or do you not? You've got to do one or the other. I mean, if you're thinking about basketball, then people sometimes say, well, is that a cheat or not, what that player just did? Well, maybe the rules don't cover it. You just lay it down. It's a matter of convention. But it can't be just a matter of convention, which person's you. And you might say, well, the rules don't cover this situation. We never thought of a Williams-style situation. So we're just going to make it a rule. We're just going to lay down the one that's getting tortured is you, or the one that's getting tortured is not you. But how could that be a matter of free decision? How could whether it's you that's being tortured be a matter of some expert body just making its decision? You can't just say what you like in this kind of situation, because everything you care about is all wrapped up with it. All your plans, your projects, your dreams, all that Laurie Paul stuff is getting hooked up to the question about which one's you. And that's why there's a question of risk here. Because you wonder, am I tying up all my plans and projects and dreams to the right person? Okay, I'll put all this in context on Friday. Okay, thanks guys. Great questions.